So this week's Parsha is a double Parsha, Acharei Mot Kedoshim, which makes it quite difficult because Acharei Mot has got so much in it, and Kedoshim has got so much in it. So what I want to do is I just want to focus on the beginning of Parshat Kedoshim and share with you some Torah from the Toshe Rebbe. We've learned some of his stuff before, but he's pretty insightful, and it's really very deep, and I'd like to share it with you. And then there's something from that also from the Nesivos Shalom, who's the Slonim Rebbe, that I'd like to share, because I think that between the two of them, they give us quite an important hashkafic way of seeing things in a very deep way. Okay, so the Torah says, Parshat Kedoshim Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe Lemor. Hashem speaks to Moshe, tells him, this is what you've got to tell everybody. Daber el kol hadas b'nei Yisrael. Speak to the whole congregation. Kol hadat b'nei Yisrael. It's not just one or two people. It's kol hadat b'nei Yisrael. Ve'amarta alehem, and speak and say to them, Kedoshim Tihiyu, you must be kodesh, which we'll have to try and understand why. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem, because I am kadosh, Hashem Elokeichem, Hashem your God. So clear, it's absolutely clear that one thing is for sure, and that is that there is a mitzvah of being kadosh. Rashi says, what does it mean? Tihiyu prushim min ha'arayos, min ha'avera. You've got to separate yourself from any of the inappropriate sexuality and min ha'avera, and from all averas. Why? Because wherever you find a space of geder, of like a fence around sexuality, that's where you could find kedusha. And it's very focused for Rashi, very focused on the sexuality. Why? Because the end of the parsha before, the end of Acharei Mot, is all about the forbidden relationships. Okay, so that's Rashi. But what's absolutely clear from Rashi is that there is a thing that you have to become kadosh. What does kadosh mean? The Ramban tells us kadosh means that you have to be. That it's not enough just to become kadosh to do the mitzvahs, but actually, in actual fact, what you've got to try and do is you've got to be prushim mina mutarim. To be kadosh, to be this holy person that the Torah wants us to be, is we've actually got to remove ourselves even from the things that are mutar. Even kadesh et atzmecha b'mutalach. Sanctify yourselves with that which is mutar, which is actually allowed. So we need to try and figure out what is going on. And it's this way the Toshe Rebbe teaches us. And it's quite a long Torah, and I'd like to go through it because I think that in it we can really find a lot of a way of how we should engage. And it says that Toshe Rebbe. What does it mean? Every single person has to look deep into their soul. And to think about themselves and to consider we all have to look into ourselves and say, at what level am I fulfilling this mitzvah of sanctify yourself even in that which is allowed? Not mustn't be like those people who say, you know what, I don't have to worry about this mitzvah. Why do I have to break my desire for the things? The Torah says I can have things. Am I such a big tzaddik that I shouldn't be able to enjoy this world? So it says the Toshe Rebbe is that don't allow your Yetzer Hara to say, I'm such a tzaddik, I'm not such a tzaddik, I don't need to work on myself. It says the opposite way around. You actually says no one's exempt from this. We all, but each person on their own level, have got an obligation to try and achieve a level of kedusha. And if we don't try, and this is what really shocked me, and if we don't try and work on ourselves on this level, then we actually we totally denigrate a positive mitzvah from the Torah, because we understand because a person, he says, should be afraid to fulfill their physical desires. Because when you fulfill your physical desires, like he says, like a donkey or a horse, that's when we move away from the fulfillment of this specific mitzvah. Okay. So now it's clear, therefore, that what he's saying is that we've got to work hard on ourselves in not engaging in the physical world for the sake of engaging in the physical world. And that takes us to the Shulchan Aruch that he quotes. The Shulchan, sorry, the Shulchan Aruch tells us the following. It's in number 231 of the Shulchan Aruch, where the Shulchan Aruch says to us the following, and it's quite a powerful statement that we should really look at. It's talking about a person after you've finished davening, after you finish everything, a person should start to learn. But he says that what happens if a person is exhausted? Like, what does he do? He says if it's possible for him to learn without sleeping in the afternoon, he can sleep. However, he shouldn't make it too long, because when you make it too long, so then you're engaging in sleep that's a little bit too long, but rather his intent should not be for the pleasure of his body, but rather to strengthen his body for the service of Hashem. And likewise, and this is the key, with anything that is pleasant for him in this world, his intent should not be for pleasure, but rather for the service of the Creator. Because it says, "B'chol darkecha da'eu," in everything that we do, we should know Hashem. In other words, in everything, through the actions that we do, number one, we should have a knowledge of Hashem, but also through our actions, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be revealed into the world. And he says even optional things, eating, drinking, walking, sitting, getting up, marital relations, conversations, all of them should be for the service of your Creator, for something that enables serving Him. Because even if you were hungry or thirsty, if you eat or drink for pleasure, that's not a good thing. Rather, you should intend to eat and drink for sustenance to serve your Creator. And even sitting amongst people, one shouldn't do it because you want to get certain, pleasure for just to be sitting amongst great people, or you want to show off and so that you're involved with people that are important. But it should always be for the service of the Creator. And so too, sleeping and resting and desire for health, all of those things are for one reason only, and that is somehow to serve the Creator. And that's really what the Toshe Rebbe then continues, and he says that Harich Lishan, why? Why do we sleep? We don't sleep to sleep. We sleep because we need to rest. In order why? To become stronger, in order to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's really such a powerful thing of what Kedoshim Tihiyu mean. And therefore he says, so what does it give us? What does it give us if we're working on ourselves all the time? It's very tiring, one would think. He says you should understand that when we habitualize ourselves to working on our physical desire, then there's a purpose to it. And what's the purpose? The purpose is the more we work on creating those gedarim, on creating those fences, the more we have a desire and a love for that which is spiritual. Because we need to understand, and this is this is where Hasidism is so powerful. It says, because in each one of us there is this deep, deep desire to connect powerfully with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But sometimes we don't feel it, we don't get it, we don't understand it. We don't even allow it to reach ourselves because we're so busy with doing things. And for me, that's part of like Pesach. Pesach is a time of deep connection. And what happens is that we get so busy, even if it is l'shem shamayim, we want to make our homes kosher Pesach, and we go crazy, and we wash the walls, and we go under the tables, and we do all these things. Like all of that is fantastic. But are we doing that l'shem shamayim, or are we doing that l'shem ma Pesach, which is very different. Sorry, I just want to send somebody the connection, and they seem to not be able to connect. But so that's the question we have to ask ourselves: is how are we doing this? Is it because we really want to connect to Hashem, or are we doing it just because that's what we've always done? And I think that if we can look at that, then I think we're in a different space. And so therefore he says, when we start realizing what is deeply inside us, that we really want to connect with Hashem, the more we remove ourselves from the physicality, the more we connect into two aspects, which are the most fundamental and important aspects, which are the learning of Torah and tefillah. And then he says, then what happens to us is that we begin. There's a Gemara which says that there's a bracha that one of the Tanaim gives to his friend when he's leaving, they're parting from one another. And one of the brachas that he gives is the bracha of Olamcha tir'eh b'chayecha. Olamcha, your world, you should see b'chayecha, in your life. And says the Toshe Rebbe, what does it mean? Your world, you should see in your life. You should see deep inside what it is that you are able to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the only way to do that is by creating those barriers. When we create those barriers, it allows us to connect in that way. And in fact, the Shlomo Rebbe says that one of the things that we've lost in the world that we live in, because we are so involved in so many things, is a real sensitivity to what it means when we say a bracha. So he says that we've got this mitzvah which is spoken about in the previous parsha of Achrei Mot. There's this mitzvah of v'chai b'hem, which means to live by the mitzvot, and comes along the Shlomo Rebbe and he says, which connects directly with this. What does it mean v'chai b'hem? What it means v'chai b'hem is that when we're living by the mitzvot, chai has two aspects. Chai means you just live, and the chai also, like the Netziv explains, means you have to have chiyus, you got to have passion. And says the Shlomo Rebbe that the mitzvah of v'chai b'hem does not mean to do the mitzvot. The mitzvah of v'chai b'hem, you have to do the mitzvah. That's another mitzvah. The mitzvah of v'chai b'hem means to instill and imbue within the mitzvot a passion. Where does that passion come from? That passion comes from digging deep and seeing my connection. And he says that on a Shabbos morning, we've got this this beautiful piyut, this beautiful poem that we sing called Kel Adon. In Shachris, people sing it in different ways, and it's really, really beautiful. And what it really is telling how the Melachim praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the mornings. And how they connect with Hashem in the most beautiful way. And one of the things that it says is that Sahala Verina Lezecher Malchuto. Sahala Verina. Sahala is enjoyment, is joy, is a sense of like excitement. Verina is song. Lezecher Malchuto is Lezecher means when into the remembrance or the mentioning of Malchuto. What is Malchuto? Malchuto means his kingship. So explains the Shlomo Rebbe. What does this mean? Says that while we talk about the Malachim enjoying Hashem's presence, what it's really saying is that we're supposed to have the same thing. Tzala verina lezecher malchuto. When we mention Hashem's name, if we have gone through this process that the Toshe Rebbe told us, that we create gedorim, we create boundaries around our physical connection and rather focus on our spiritual connection, and we are able to dig deep and take out that very essence of Kedusha that is deep inside us, then we will also feel this enjoyment, lezecher malchuto, when we mention the malchut of Hashem. And says the Shlomo Rebbe, you know, when you do that, you do it all the time. Every single time you make a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Lezecher Malchuto. When we mention the kingship of Hashem, meaning that Hashem is in charge of everything in this world, we should be jumping around with excitement. I mean, can you imagine that, right? Imagine you're about to say, you're sitting right at Frangelica's, right? And they bring you this delicious cheesecake. So the broch on cheesecake is she'akol, because the base is normally not thick enough. And you're sitting there and you say, oh, you know, because you're about to eat it, you know, and we all whisper these brochas under our breath, which I still I still battle with that while I do it, so I can't discuss with anyone else. So you say, imagine this: you're sitting there and you're going, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Can you believe it? You go crazy. So what I'm going to post on the group. I'll post you a video of the Toshe Rebbe, who we're speaking about, making a bracha. When the Toshe Rebbe is making a bracha of Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz, you'll see what he means of how connected you, how it's mind blowing, because it's something you've never seen before. I promise you that nobody's ever seen something like that before. But that's what he's saying. The depth of the connection will enable us to get so excited and so connected, and that we're able to move out of our kind of like restricted space and really enjoy the enjoyment of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe maybe we can actually watch it at the end and then I'll post it. But the Rav Wolbe was one of the great Balei Mussar. He passed away not so long ago. So he says that we understand that we have got to work on this concept of striving for holiness. So how do we do such a thing? So one of the first thing that the Torah mentions, besides honoring your parents, which in itself is a different, one of the things it says that you've got to leave Peah, Leket, and Shichacha. Peah, Leket, and Shichacha are when one has a farm, one has to leave certain things for the poor people to come and get it. One of the things that you leave is a small portion in the corner of your crop. Says the Rav Wolbe. So how does that bring you to be such a big kadosh? You're leaving a small bit of your crop, and from that you get Kedoshim Tihiyu, you become kadosh, you're holy, unbelievable. So it says this small little gesture seems to be a little bit an inconsequential gesture of kindness. Why does that create kedusha? So he says you have to look at the Ravid. Now the Ravid in Shara Kedusha says, most of us find it very hard to do real tshuva. I'll speak for myself. Okay? Real tshuva, where we really dig deep into ourselves and we say, this is what I've done and I'm not going to do it again. And I'm a bit of a shkotz, and now I've got to develop, and I'm going to say sorry to Hashem, and I'm going to say sorry to all the people that I hurt. That's quite hard. Actually, very hard. It's very, very, very hard. It's easy to do in the al-chait, you can hurt yourself and you do a bit of bruising on the left-hand side of your chest, but that's not real tshuva. Tshuva is a process, and it's an intense process. So it says the Ravid, right? One of the spaces of tshuva is to fast. That if you fast, that's why we have all these different fast days over the year, is that's supposed to encourage tshuva. So, but what happens if a person decides he or she has done something that they really shouldn't have done, and now they want to fast to do tshuva, but they don't really have the stamina to do that. So says the Rav, an unbelievable thing. He says, you know what you should do? Just leave a small amount on your plate that you don't eat. And not the stuff you don't like to eat, right? It's like you got this beautiful steak, magnificent steak, it's been made, beautiful, everything exactly as you like it. Just leave a small piece. So at first glance, it seems like anyone can do that. But it's not so simple. It's not so simple, because the reality is that this food is beautiful, it's appetizing, it's something you want to eat, it's your favorite food in the whole world, and that you've got to leave a little bit. Why? The whole idea is just to subdue your cravings and just to, give away to everything that you need. What we often do in that case, says the Ravid, and this is a very powerful thing. We've got this concept of Bal Tashchit. Bal Tashchit means don't waste, for all intents and purposes. So let's say you've got this beautiful steak, if you like steak, or ribs, or piece of salmon, whatever it is, like the best of the best. And you're eating it, and it's fantastic. And you say, oh, I'm going to be like the Ravid said I should be. I'm going to work on myself, and I'm going to leave it a little bit. So you decide you're going to leave it a little bit. That little thin part on the tail there, right? You leave a little bit. But then you say, hold on a second. It's not correct for me to leave a little bit, right? Because that's wasting a beautiful piece of salmon. Why should I waste it? So he says, and it goes back to what the Toshe Rebbe said. He says, this is not an exercise in destroying or wasting food, but rather, if we see it as part of an exercise in improving our character, then it's l'shem shamayim. And once it's l'shem shamayim, it's no longer a wastage, but rather it has benefits. So explains the Ravolbi. He says, and I think this is really the core of everything. He says, what does it mean to if you give into your desires that it moves you away from Kedusha, whilst the other does opposite? He says it's very simple. You need to be aware of our Yetzer Haras. Our Yetzer Haras are so powerful. They are so overwhelming. They are so clever and manipulative that in actual fact, it's like a magnetic field, that we are so attracted into the power of our Yetzer Hara that the closer we get into the Yetzer Hara, the closer we get into the Gashmius, into the physicality of everything, the more powerful it is and the more difficult it is to pull ourselves out, right? And when that happens, our neshamas and our seichel, right, which is our spirituality and our consciousness, find it difficult to battle with that thing. But the minute we say, hold on a second, I'm going to stop, then in actual fact, we're no longer under the influence of that like magnetic field that's pulling us in, and that enables us to enter the field of kedusha and of seichel. And that is what's so important for us to understand as we go into this this time of the year, which is a very powerful time. That this we're moving up towards Shavuot, and what has become our focus of this moving towards Shavuot has been Sfirat HaOmer. But Sfirat HaOmer, in the old days, Sfirat HaOmer was a wonderful time. It was a time of personal growth. It was a time where people were happy. It was the end. It was the beginning of the season. People could eat all the new fruits because they had brought the Korban HaOmer, and everything was moving towards a wonderful thing. Except there was we know that the korban that is brought on Shavuot is called the Shtei Halechem. It's the only time you bring a chometz tikka korban. Why? Because chometz is the same thing. Chometz is that gashmiut that you have to remove yourself away, and you bring that as a korban, because this time of the year really is the time. And I'm not saying it's easy. Please understand. I'm not in any way saying that this is an easy space to be in, but it is a space that we have to try and work on to kadesh et atzmacha u'mutalach, to try and somehow find a way to dig deep within ourselves, to sanctify ourselves with the things that are mutar, that are allowed to us. We often don't realize that we are allowed to do many things, but the space that allows us to connect with that, with our spirituality, is not having a massive Shabbos meal. That's not the time of spirituality. The Shabbos meal is there to feed us in order to enable us to connect with the Torah that we're supposed to learn, with the family connections that we're supposed to have. And so therefore, Rav Sternbach says, and so on Shabbos, the holiest day of the week, it's a mitzvah to partake of the choicest food. Right? Far from contradicting the holiness of the day, the act of eating is conducive to holiness. If the person eats for the sake of Kedushat Hayom, rather than his own personal pleasure. When we eat, are we getting oneg Shabbos, or are we getting just oneg, enjoyment of ourselves? And that's really why we sit around the Shabbos table. And when we sit around the Shabbos table, we try and sing and we try and talk and we try and elevate the conversation. Often, like I'll say to my family, like, this is not what we want to be talking about on Shabbos. Let's rather just sing a song, because it's hard to break off from conversations. It's hard to break off because those are part of the connections that we have with one another. But the highest level of connection is just to be able to connect with ourselves. As Rav Hofstetter says, sanctity is achieved when a person reaches a level of self-control that places him or her in charge of their desires, as opposed to allowing their desires to control themselves. And I think that really is the message of Kedoshim Tihiyu, that we can become kadosh. To become kadosh doesn't mean that we have to be some ascetic somewhere else. All it means is that in our lives, we have to look and see, as the Toshe Rebbe said, find that one space, just one space, where we where we can say, this is something I need to work on, something where I have to, where I say, I'm going to remove myself from just a small thing, and in that way we achieve this holiness. What I would like to share with you on my screen is the Toshe Rebbe's brocha. Just if you can give me a second just to find it, because I do believe very, very strongly that it is certainly something worthwhile seeing. I found it. Give me a second. I'm just going to open it up and then I'll share my screen. Okay. just understand who this man is. He was just a completely powerfully holy man. Lived in Canada most of his life after he came out of the war. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you share it. Thanks for joining today. Bezrat Hashem, we will all be able to work on ourselves in a specific way to achieve a high level of Kedusha. Here is the video clip.
Rebbe, I'll talk to you after. Wow.
Okay, this is the Toshe Rebbe. Watch this.
Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech hu olam, hamoit Elechem, min huret, oh my.
That's quite a bracha. That is quite a bracha. And good luck with that one.
Monster Math presents
It's a good
Addition
thought,
Below 10.
Good luck with that
Okay,
one.
class,
I'm just wanting
let's
to
begin.
close this off, yeah. I mean, I just think that is something to see.
Very powerful. Wow, very powerful.
Melech HaOlam. And that's the end of the.
Sure.
Have a beautiful day, everybody.
Thank you for